Good morning, guys. Once again, good morning. Okay, so where are others? Why they have not joined yet? If you guys have their number, you can ask them to join quickly so that we can start, right? Okay, so it seems that all those who are willing to join has joined. So is my screen visible, guys? Should we start? Guys, is the screen visible? Okay, good, good, good. So let's start with the session. Right, we started with Hadoop introduction and we went why it is needed, what is big data. We discussed about different frameworks that are being supported in Hadoop, right? How Apache Hadoop is configured and how the architecture is of, what are the frameworks that are supported. This we saw last time. And okay, sorry. We learned also about the MapReduce, that how MapReduce works, how it is mapping all the inputs, how it is giving the output, right? And yeah, we also did this programming model with MapReduce, a very basic program, like orientation of nodes, and yeah, how MapReduce works. Fault tolerance. I think we have to start from this point of fault tolerance, right, guys? Or we need to. I think we are done with orientation of nodes and MapReduce working, right? So I am pretty sure that we have to start from fault tolerance, or we are done with fault tolerance. Okay, yeah, we are done with this part also, right? We are done with this part also. And input splits also, input to reduce tasks. Okay, I think we had to start from input for the reduce task. We are done with splits. Or okay, so we had to start from input splits, right, guys? Yes, okay, good. So let's continue from this place. Now, as we saw in previous slides, we are dividing our inputs, or we are dividing the data that we have, gathered from different system, which we have integrated into a single system. Now, in input splits, Hadoop divides the input to a MapReduce job into a fixed size pieces which are called input splits, okay, or just splits. Hadoop creates one map task for each split, which runs the user-defined map function for each record in the split. Okay, so for every record, it will run its own function that you have defined while using that Hadoop split. Okay, so for example, if you want, square of every number, so every node will get one number and it will compute the square of that number by itself. Okay, and this way it will split the task with different numbers and different nodes, and it will map the things to map function and reduce function, right? The quality of load balancing increases as the splits become more fine grained. Okay, load balancing works more effectively if you have more fine grained data. That means if you have more segregated data. But if splits are too small, then the overhead of managing the splits and of the map task creation begins to dominate the total job execution time. For most of the job, the good split size is tend to be a size of HDFS block, which can be 64 by default, right? Now 64 is 64 MB is default. It's not compulsory that you should be using the same. You can change it according to your requirement. If you have a larger system, you can make larger pieces also, right? Now, why to do this task? Why to split our input? Map task write their output to a local disk and not to HDFS directly. Therefore, map output is intermediate output, right? It is processed by reduced task to produce the final output. And once the job is complete, the map output can be thrown away. So storing it in HDFS with replication would be a waste of time. It is also possible that the node running the map task fails before the map output has been consumed by the reduced task, right? So this are the reason why we are not storing whatever we have split it into HDFS directly. We first perform the reduced task and then we store the final results into HDFS. Okay. Now we have to get the inputs to reduce the task. Reduced tasks don't have advantage of data locality. The input to a single reduced task is normally the output of all mappers, right? All the map functions that have worked with the system will be working in parallel to reduce task. Okay. You can see over here, first you are splitting the data, split 0, 1, 2, 3, and likewise. Then you are mapping it to nodes or the processor which it is going to run with. Then it will copy it into local data, right? It will merge the answer. Then it will perform the reduced task. Sorry, guys. Yeah, sorry. Yes, then it will map it to reduce function. Okay, once it has combined all the data, it will work with the reduce part. It will create an output 0, right? Output and that output will be saved in an HDFS application. Okay, HDFS location, right? So this is how the flow works with MapReduce data flow with single reduce task. There can be multiple, right? Because in parallel you can have number of maps and number of reduces, and you can also have number of outputs, right? So even you can have copying into different systems with different splits, so as to if you have certain mechanism where it requires all the input from different systems, then it can also work. For example, I want to add numbers from 1 to 12, right? So split 1 will have, let's say, number 1, 2, 3. Split 2 will have 4, 5, 6, and split 3 will have 7, 8, 9. So it needs to copy all the numbers and then it will add those numbers, right? And at the end it will give you an output of whatever the addition that comes up, right? So it's not compulsory that it will be only one-to-one mapping. You can have many-to-many mapping also. Okay, and they can be even working in different, complete different track, right? For example, one is square calculation, one is mean calculation, one is average calculation. So you can still have different maps with no reduce task, right? You are just directly mapping whatsoever data you are trying to process with HDFS function, because maybe in some of the application you have very simple task, right? Let's say you have an unstructured data of name of all the websites, right? So it does not require any processing. You are just willing to store it for later, using it on later on, right? So that you can directly map it using the mapper to an HDFS location. Yeah, the combiner function. Now this one is important, guys. The combiner function, as the name suggests, it is used to combine whatsoever output we are getting, right? Many MapReduce jobs are limited by the bandwidth available on the cluster. As I said, in a cluster, you can have different system residing at the same place, or maybe at different places, different geographical locations, which by they are connected by internet or some LAN model, or at least with an Ethernet cable, right? So their bandwidth, the support they have for data transfer limit in the network card becomes a bottleneck, right? That becomes the bottleneck. Now, in order to minimize the data transferred between map and reduce tasks, combiner functions are introduced. So, in order to control that, or in order to, have a high output, even though if the systems are at different location, we use combiner function. Okay. Hadoop allows the user to specify a combiner function which is to be run on the map output. The combiner function output forms the input to reduce function. Guys, just a minute. I'm getting a call. Just a minute. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, guys, for that. Uh, yes. We were discussing the combiner function, right? The combiner function which combines all things, means the function output forms the input to the reduce function, right? Whatever the map has given output will be combined in reduce as well as whatever the output that has been created by the reduce function. Okay, combiner functions can help cut down the amount of data shuffled between the maps and reduces. Okay, it combines and it cut downs the amount of data that needs to be transferred to and fro from maps and reduces, right? uh, Coming to next part of this chapter is about Hadoop streaming, right? We just saw that there is a requirement in cluster that you need to pass on the data, right? We even discussed RPC and RMI, remote procedure call and remote method invocation. So how one system is controlling the other system, we'll try to learn over here with Hadoop streaming. Hadoop provides an API to MapReduce that allows you to write your map and reduce function in languages other than Java also. Okay, even though its base is in Java, but you have an API which can convert other languages and it can be used in the same way just like Java. Guys, I hope you know API, or do I need to clear this concept of API?
No, sir, clear.
You guys know, right? Good, good. Okay. Yeah. So I'm continuing with this now. Hadoop streaming uses Unix standard streams as the interface between Hadoop and your program. So you can easily, or you can use any language that can be read standard input and write to the standard output to your write MapReduce program. Okay, now as I said, it is working with server system. So either you should be having Windows Server OS installed, or you need to have any of the Unix or Linux system. Now you see this is one of the great advantage of using Unix or Linux system. For example, I can convert my simple Ubuntu simple Ubuntu OS as server also, right? I can turn my Fedora into server OS, right? Because they are configured in such a way that they can be used in both the purpose, desktop OS as well as server OS, right? Even though Windows can be used, but Windows requires a long procedure or a long steps which you need to perform before making it server kind of a machine, right? In even though after making it a server machine, it does not give you that much of output, right? It hangs, it stucks at many places, and there are lot many dependencies when you install something new, right? So there are problems with Windows, but whereas in Unix and Linux, they work very fine with any of the software, right? And today in lab, we'll also try to learn about how this Unix system works with. As of now, I have Ubuntu, so we'll discuss that part, right? Okay. Coming to second part of this is its Hadoop pipes, right? Now Hadoop pipes is the name of C++ interface to Hadoop MapReduce, right? Unlike streaming, which uses standard input and output to communicate with the map and reduce code, pipes uses sockets as the channel over which the task tracker communicates with the process running the C++ map or reduce function. JNI is not used. Okay, now try to understand this point very properly. That Hadoop pipes is not native library that can be used with any of other programming language. It is already configured with C++. So actually you don't need to code anything in that. It will be handled by itself. The only thing is it will take whatsoever input in its form of C++ with Hadoop MapReduce, and it will work with the sockets. Right now, there are concept of sockets and port number in networking because they bifurcate whatever traffic that we are having over our this network, right? Internet or network whatsoever. If you remember, you might have learned something in networking, like if you want to run a web page, you have to go with the port number 80, which is by default, or you can also use port number 8080, right? Then there are different port numbers for your mail, SMTP, IMPS, right? There are number of port numbers, and that work with each other. Okay, socket, port numbers, all this are concept of our networking. And using the channels, they are bifurcated. Okay, in just like our FM radio, if you go with 93.5, it will be a different channel. Let's say it's a red FM. If you go with 95.3, it will be a different FM, right? Let's say it's a radio Mirchi. If you go with 98.3, it's completely a different channel, right? So based on that frequency, based on that particular set of values, each of the channel is bifurcated, and each of the channel can carry different set of data without hindering each other, right? They will not overlap with each other, and your data can be transferred without introducing any error, right? So all this work with C++, and over here JNI, that is Java native interface, right? Java native interface is not used. You can as we talked about the previous modules like streaming and all, they can work with Java, without Java also. But they use JNI, that is Java native interface, but Hadoop pipes does not use, because it has already in support of C++, right? So this was Hadoop pipes. Then coming back to HDFS, that is Hadoop Distributed File System, after discussing this many things with our MapReduce, we know that how these two tasks work. Now let's try to understand how HDFS works. Before that, any doubts or queries till this point, guys? Oops, sorry. But any doubts or queries till this point, guys? Okay, okay, good, good. So no doubt, and let's continue with the topic. Just a minute, guys. Yes. Yes. Now, file systems that manage the storage across network of machines are called distributed file system. We even have network file system. And if you want to do a little bit more research, what you can do is, if you have router at your home, if you are using a Wi-Fi router, you can see if it has a USB port, right? If it has an advanced router, a little bit costlier router, you will be able to find a USB port, right? So what happens is, when you attach a pen drive or maybe hard disk to that USB port, uh, that router will support a network file system. That means you can access the data of that pen drive or hard disk from any of the system that is allowed to connect with that router, right? That Wi-Fi router. And that kind of mechanism is called network file system. So you can have a directly attached hard disk, you can have a system with an attached hard disk, okay? And there are a number of many other ways also. So if you are free and if you are interested, you can do this experiment, right? If you have a router with hard disk support, USB support, right? Hadoop comes with a distributed file system, which is called HDFS, which stands for Hadoop Distributed File System. HDFS, the Hadoop Distributed File System, is a distributed system designed to hold very large amounts of data, terabytes or even petabytes, and provide the high throughput access to the information. Okay. Okay, now actually I'm using the slideshow with Ubuntu. I have not used slideshow with Ubuntu previously. Mm, oops, sorry. Yeah. Okay. Yes. Now, as you can see in the image, yeah, you have this data nodes, which are the systems connected at a single location. Then you have rack 2 and other data nodes which are connected through the mode of client and name node, right? This is the SDFS architecture. You have data nodes located at different location. You have one client which can access this data nodes by the means of read and write operation, right? And you have metadata operations with the name node, and it can do block operations, right? With this different data nodes, it can do the block operations. File systems that manages, okay, we are done with that. Okay, it's repeating. Yeah, problems in distributed file system. Now this one is important, guys. If you look at this please properly, it tries to tell us that what things we need to take care while using distributed file system, what effects it will have on the system that we are going to use with respect to this HDFS, right? So making distributed file system is more complex than regular disk file system. This is because of the data that is spanned over multiple nodes. So all complications of network programming kick in, right? So in parallel to your data structure, your data algorithms, you also need to have network programming, right? We just talked about sockets and all. So that sockets and port number programming, all things you have to take care, and that comes into picture because you are trying to get data from different systems, right? You may face an hardware failure also, right? You may face an HDFS instance may consist of hundreds or thousands of server machine, each storing part of the file's system data. The fact that there are huge number of components and that each component has a non-trivial probability of failure means that some of the components of SDFS is always non-functional. That means let me take an example. You have a cluster of, let's say, 50 systems, right? 50 computers. Now you are trying to gather data from any of the 30 systems because you require only 30 machines to work out your problem. So at that time, your 20 machines will be still sitting idle without any work and they will be non-functional. But whenever your any of the machine goes down from the 30 that are working, then what will happen? The load balancer will replace the machine that has gone down with one of the newer machine that is already ideal or in a working state, usually in ideal only, not in the working state, because it will then erase the data that it has, right? So now you have one corrupted machine, 30 working machine, and 19 ideal machine, right? So this is what happens when you face an hardware failure. Second is you have a problem of large data sets. Okay, applications that run on HDFS have large data sets. A typical file in HDFS is of gigabytes to terabytes in size. Thus, HDFS is tuned to support the large files. It should provide high aggregated data
bandwidth and scale to hundreds of nodes in a single cluster. It should support tens of millions of files in a single instance. Okay, it should support a huge range of files in terms of indexing, in terms of storing it, in terms of retrieving the required information, right? So there are number of operations that happen in the background, right? Even if I ask you to index, let's say 5,000 file, then it becomes a tedious task, like what, based on what you have to index. After indexing, what should be the file name, how the relevancy should be. You want to short it by modification or updation time or what, right? So there are number of parameters that works in when you are dealing with such a large data set. Okay. Now, the goals which were in mind of the developers while designing the HDFS are as below. That what they were thinking, while they were introducing or while they were creating Hadoop distributed file system is, first one is streaming data access. Right, applications that run on HDFS need streaming access to their data sets. They are not general purpose applications that typically run on general purpose file systems. SDFS is designed more for batch processing rather than interactive use by users. The emphasis is on high throughput of data access rather than low latency of data access, right? So we know that previously, right, we used to have a lot many batch processors or batch servers. They used to do a task in batches, right? We cannot give a simple one task or two tasks to our server machine because it was not designed to work like that. So what it will do is it will take like 1,000 2,000 queries at the same time, and then it will try to run it. Okay. uh, so this was just a simple example. In reality, it's much different than that. But just for our understanding, HDFS is also designed for batch processing. That means it is not going to work with simple 1 plus 1 equal to 2 calculation, right? If you have like 50 lakh calculation to be done in the same time, then it would be more helpful and useful. Okay. Yeah. POSIX, that is post notation, imposes many hard requirements that are not needed for applications that are targeted for HDFS. POSIX semantics in a few key areas has been traded to increase the data throughput rates. Data throughput means whatever your process data is coming out from the system, right? Whatever the output is giving to the system. Okay, so that was about streaming data access. Second is simple coherency model, right? Coherency means you should be doing the task at the same time coherently. Okay, HDFS application need a write once, read many access model for files, because once you store it, most of the time you will be only retrieving it, right? Removing the files will be very rare case because you will be storing it for longer purpose. Now, a file once created, returned, and closed need not to be changed. This assumption simplifies data coherency issues and enables your high throughput data access. A MapReduce application or a web crawler application fits perfectly with this model. There is a plan to support appending writes to the file in future, but it is already done, right? Slides are a little bit older, so don't worry. Parallel write is also done with Hadoop. So even if we install today Hadoop, you will be, seeing that it can write multiple things, it can read multiple things, or maybe different things at the same time, right? It has no bottleneck as of now. And moving computation is cheaper than moving data. We already discussed this proverb, right? The computation requested by an application is much more efficient if it is executed near the data it operates on. This is especially true when the size of data is set huge. This minimizes the network congestion and increases the overall throughput of the system. The assumption is that it is often better to migrate the computation. Guys, 1 minute. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry guys. Sorry. Actually, we have this gate exam this weekend, so I'm getting a lot of calls for that. So, are you guys, any of you planning for gate or something like that in next year or maybe this year? Anyone planning for gate or something? No,
No, sir.
no. Okay. So you guys are good with bachelor only. You don't need to go for masters, right? Acha, Brigu is planning. Brinda is also planning. Good. So you will meet again if you go for gate. Uh, yes. Let's get back to the topic now. Yeah, we were discussing. Okay, network congestion minimization, increasing of the throughput. The assumption is that it is often better to migrate computation closer to where the data is located rather than moving the data to where the application is running, right? Obviously, we know that it requires more time to fetch the data from hard disk. It requires less time, moderate time, not less. It requires moderate time to fetch the data from our RAM, and it requires the least time to fetch our data from lattice and cache memory, right? So we know that the nearer the processor to our data, the less time it takes for the throughput, right? SDFS provides interface for applications to move themselves closer to wherever the data is located. You have portability across heterogeneous hardware and software platforms. SDFS has been designed to be easily portable from one platform to another. This facilitates widespread adoption of HDFS as a platform of choice for large set of application. Now, right guys, when we discussed about cluster, we discussed that it can have different system, right? Now, different system means both difference in form of hardware, difference in form of platforms. First, if I talk about hardware, let's say my laptop is i3, your laptop is i5, someone has i7, someone has, let's say, Ryzen 5 or Ryzen 7, right? Still we can combine all our systems to make a cluster, right? And if I talk about platforms, let's say my system has Windows, your system has, let's say, Ubuntu, someone else has Fedora, someone else has, let's say, Windows 10, right? So it still can combine all the computing power, all the storage power, and it can come into one cluster umbrella. Okay, it our cluster can still accommodate all the type of heterogeneous systems which are different in form of software as well as hardware. Okay, now the design of HDFS, the properties which are taken care while designing the HDFS. First was you had a support of very large files. Okay, files that are hundreds of megabytes, gigabytes, or terabytes in size. There are Hadoop clusters running today that store metadata. Right, guys? Just a minute. Just a minute. Yeah, yeah. Okay, yeah. Mm, yes, we were discussing. Yes, the very large file structure that has been, supported by SDFS. Then streaming data access that we already learned. SDFS is built around the idea that most efficient data processing pattern is the write once and read many times pattern. A dataset is typically generated or copied from the source, then various analyses are performed on the dataset over the time. Now, each analysis will involve a large proportion of the dataset, so the time to read the whole dataset is more important than the latency in reading the first record, right? Latency is the time delay, right? Whatever the time it requires to read the first record is not of that significant importance, because it can only start the process once it has the whole data set, right? That's why it is important to have all the things nearer to your processor, and that thing will be in more helpful manner compared to having the data at different location. Okay, then there is low latency data access, where the applications that require low latency access to the data in tens of milliseconds, right, guys? Tens of millisecond, which is like microseconds. In terms of, it is giving you an answer in microseconds, right? Microsecond range will not work well with HDFS. Remember, HDFS is optimized for delivering a high throughput of data, and this may be at the expense of latency. HBase, forget this chapter 12, is currently a better choice for low latency access. HBase is also one of the framework that we discussed, right? So it helps you to get data in a quicker manner or faster manner. Okay. Yes, multiple writers and arbitrary file modification. Files in HDFS may be returned to by a single writer. Okay, writes are always made at the end of file. There is no support for multiple writers or for the modifications at arbitrary offsets in the file, right? This might be supported in future, which is already there, but they are likely to be relatively inefficient. But it's already done. It is done with a simple change that allows you to pursue whatever mechanism you want to have in your system, right, guys? Yeah, then lots of small files. Let's say I have a data set which consists of let's say uh, 10 lakh of images, right? Maybe the size of image is not that huge, but the number of files, that is 10 lakhs, it's in itself is a very large number, right? So in order to handle such things, we have mechanism. Since the name node holds the file system metadata in memory, the limit to the number of files in a file system is governed by the amount of memory on the name node. Okay. As the rule of thumb, each file directory and block takes 150 bytes. So, for example, if you had 1 million files, that is 10 lakh files, each taking one block, you would be needing at least 300 MB of memory, right? Just to store the naming and map it with the files, you still need 300 MB of data, right? While storing millions of file is feasible, billions is beyond the capability of current hardware. But it's already done, right? It's not a matter of worry. There are number of systems which are already handling billions of files. Okay, so we'll try to learn about them also, right? Then there is commodity hardware. Now Hadoop doesn't require expensive, highly reliable hardware to run on. Okay, it does not require a perfect server system, like you need to have a Xeon processor, you need to have a very large hard disk, you need to have a very large, motherboard and that processor mechanism. It is designed to run on clusters of commodity hardware for which the chance of node failure across the cluster is high, at least for large cluster. It is designed to run with even simple systems like ours, right? We'll be going through how to install Hadoop today. So it's not like for us we need compulsorily some heavy duty hardware. No, it can still work with commodity hardware, that is simple hardwares, right? But the only thing is it has high chances of uh, having a failure, right? If you have a large job that you are trying to execute, there is a chance that it may fail, right? But we'll start with simple jobs, so there's no worry, and most probably it will not fail, right? SDFS is designed to carry on working without a noticeable interpretation interruption to the user in face of such a failure. It is also worth examining the applications for which using HDFS does not work so well. While this may be changed in the future, there are areas where HDFS is not a good fit today. But it all things are just overcome as of now. So don't try to remember that part, right? Concepts of HDFS. Okay. All the things clear till this point, guys. All the things clear till this point. Okay. Brinda is clear. What about others? Okay. Okay. So what will we do is we'll keep till this point in theoretical part, right? And we'll move ahead in next lecture for this. And we do have lab session, right? Just now at 10 o'clock, right, guys? So what we'll do is you guys can have a 5-6 minutes of break, and then let's meet up in the lab session, right? So I think you all six are present. There is one person who is absent. Okay, so I'll still write down the names for simplicity. Okay, no need to write down. Okay, I'll write down it physically. That 3, 4. Yeah. Anjali. Anjali, Brigu, Brinda, Jairaj, Keshav, and Nimit. Right? You guys are present. Okay, so we'll keep till this point and let's meet up again in the lab session after 5 minutes with the lab link only. Okay. Okay, guys, you can go for a break and you can disconnect from this meeting now.